Okay, hello, welcome to institutional aggression. Um, this is different in the sense that it's explaining just about aggression within institutions. So hopefully you have a kind of understanding what an institution is, but for the main question, everything you need to know, it's going to be about prisons. We will look loosely at what an institution is, but for the context of the question, it will always ask it mainly in a kind of prisonal sense. Okay, the way to think about this straight away is it's bad apples or bad baskets. So that will make more sense as we go along. But what is it that's made violence happen in an institution? Okay, this is the main question. Now this is quite a big PowerPoint, so be ready to make quite a lot of notes. There's basically two 12 markers, two 15 markers within this. But the biggest question they could ask: discuss explanations of institutional aggression in context of prisons. So there are two basically, and we're going to look through each one, what each one says, and evaluate each one. But that's the big question. Make a note of that, please. Okay, so what is an institution? Institutions are simply groups of people held together by a common factor. This may be distinct entities, e.g. schools or prisons. There may be distinct groups, police, army. There may be less distinct groups, e.g. terrorist groups, sororities. What examples of aggression can you think? Don't worry too much about that. But just understand that you are an institution in the sense that you're at Finchley Catholic. You may be in an institution by another group that you've joined. You know, if you're part of not necessarily a football supporter, but if you're part of one of their groups, you know, you go to meetings or whatever, then that's it. They've got the police are their own entity, army their own entity. You don't need all of this slide. You just need to understand what we mean by an institution. In the main context here is going to be around prisons. Okay, what is institutional aggression? Institutional aggression is the violent behaviour that exists within these institutions. This aggression may be a defining feature of the group. However, this aggression may be rife within the group, but may be readily accepted by its members. And that will make more sense. Don't worry too much about that. What would I put there? Just that it can be a defining feature of the group. Is probably quite important. So some groups, institutions, like the fact that they're seen as violent or not. It becomes defining. It becomes what they're about. And if you're part of that group, you're expected to be aggressive. Okay, so prisons is going to be the main context here. If you haven't read any about this and you haven't thought about it, the main question here is: are you aggressive? If you went to prison, would you be aggressive in prison because you're an aggressive person? Or would you be aggressive because the prison has created a situation around you to be aggressive? And that's the main question. That's the two major models. Here they are. So two, I'm probably going to want to separate them out. We're going to talk about the importational or dispositional first for 5-10 minutes, and then the other one 5-10 minutes. So situational is 5-10 minutes. So dispositional, you're going to need to know what it says, how it says aggression comes about, and evaluate it, and situational as well. So whether you're separating out your notes or spider diagram, there's going to be two distinct kind of theories here. Okay, so the A1 for dispositional. Importational is what is the main way I think of it. Is you import something in. Okay, this suggests that the behaviour is due to a few bad apples, not the situation. Therefore, any aggression in prisons is due to the personalities, key term there, of the individuals, inmates, rather than the situation. Okay, so that's the main bit you have to get from this. The first model is saying that it's aggressive people. You were aggressive outside the world. You were a gang member. You were you know, you're in here because you're really violent, therefore you're just going to be violent in the prison. Okay. When we look at the other one, it's obviously going to say that the prison and the surroundings and the situation have something to do with aggression. Right? Both have evidence for and against, but this one, the dispositional, individualistic importations, basically is about personalities, individual personalities, their upbringing before they get to the prison. Okay. General Myers, this is quite a famous kind of quote, and we'll look at Abu Ghraib later on, but Abu Ghraib, for those that don't know, you can either quickly look it up and we'll see some pictures later, but it was the horrendous prison in Iraq, and when they're over there, Afghanistan, where there were people doing awful things to some of the prisoners, and it was this idea of whether the army had institutionalized them and made them be like that, or whether in this case, obviously, General Myers, the chairman of the US Army, state that the abuse in the prison was due to rogue soldiers, so these one-off people, rather than the institution itself. And we'll keep coming back to that idea of whether it was the army's fault, or whether it is the prison's fault, or whether it's the individual's fault. Okay, Owen and Cressy, 1962. You're not going to need all of this. You're just going to need to understand their idea of how it came about, and hopefully this makes sense. They basically broke it down into 3 subcultures. And again, just have these 3 titles, but pick out 2 or 3 key points, key words from each one, just so you understand that they're saying that these people come into the prison. So you've got the criminal subculture. Okay, that's the maybe the top end. They follow the norms associated with being a thief, a criminal, values such as not betraying each other or being trustworthy amongst other criminals. So they're going to be probably highly violent because of the criminal subculture they've come in with. You've got the convict subculture. They've been raised in the prison system. They look for positions of power and influence within the system. This group are the most likely to turn aggressive, influenced by deprivation, and that's a word for us, deprivation, that you'll understand more as we go through this PowerPoint, prior to being imprisoned, and bring values of their subculture inside of them. And the straight subculture, one-off offenders, weren't part of the criminal subculture before going inside. They reject both other groups within prison. They're not part of the criminal or the convict subculture. They're going to identify more with prison officers, and they are obviously going to try and stay out with that of aggressive situations and stay away from trouble. Okay, so they're saying that there are these 3 different types of people that get imported, get brought into the prison, and because of their previous personality traits and beliefs, they're then going to act differently based on their attitudes. Okay. According to this theory, interpersonal violence in prisons is not a product of the institution itself, but rather the characteristics of individuals who enter such institutions. That's their kind of key term. So it's not the institution, it is the characters, the individuals that have made it aggressive. They brought in their gang culture, they brought in their problems, and from that come the issues of violence and aggression. Okay, and again, just to get us thinking, what kind of traits, characteristics can a prisoner bring with them which may influence their subsequent aggressive behaviour? So I've mentioned gang culture, I've mentioned, or did I mention anything else? But there's testosterone, there's upbringing, there's so many different things that when you think about it, could become traits and characteristics that mean you're going to be aggressive in prison. You could be somebody that enjoys power, and if you enjoy power, you're going to have to be powerful in a prison. How do you get power in a prison? Well, you're going to have to be aggressive in some way. Okay. So on to evaluating these. Hopefully you understand what the model is saying. It's quite simple. You're importing things in. So what does the evidence say? What have people done? Right. So Keller and Wang. High security prisons statistically have higher levels of assaults on staff by inmates. This suggests that it's the personality of the inmate, okay, which led for them to be aggressive. So explain that out again if you didn't get it first time around. If I'm really aggressive, I've committed a lot of crimes, I get caught, I'm going to go to a higher level, higher security prison. Okay, in higher security prisons there is more aggression. Okay, so the correlation is saying that more aggression outside equals more aggression inside. Hopefully that makes sense. It's just a basic correlation between the worse criminals coming in, the worse the aggression. Okay, so DeLisi also found evidence for the relationship, or the way to predict whether somebody was going to be violent or not. So with this one we got 800 male Californian inmates. And they basically looked at their anger, irritability, substance abuse, parental kind of background, and from that, the kind of dispositional factors, things that they were bringing into prison, found strong evidence that it was linked with then misconduct violence, aggression within the prison. So they were basically able to predict the more dispositional factors of things like that would be predictors of aggression, like anger, irritability, substance abuse, parental upbringing, problems with this, blah blah blah. That was able to predict. So a real positive here for the importation model. Okay, here in another AO3, and you're going to learn a lot more about the other explanations, but you want to get it here in your AO3 of the dispositional importation model, is the situational forces. So there is obviously this other one that is going to say, well, no, it's not what you bring into the prison, it's how the prison and everything is, and how you're, what the cultures of that society are that you're going into, okay, that have an effect. So with this other one, obviously, one of the AO3 points for the situational factors will be compared to dispositional. But in this instance, you've got Zimbardo sums it up quite well. He claimed that many of the same psychological processes were found between the Stanford prison experiment and Abu Ghraib, suggesting situational factors had a major impact on the behaviour of the guards. So it wasn't that the guard was aggressive, that the guard had anger or irritability, like we've found so far. He was saying actually it was the psychological processes, what that prison was like, what their expectations were meant to be of the people working there were meant. Okay, and lots of evidence to show that. Lots of the people that went to prison, the guards, had no history whatsoever of violence outside of being in the army. So can they explain it as this sour apples or bad apples, or however they put it. However, many studies do not support the deprivation model, showing pre-institutionalization was the biggest predictor of inmate aggression, regardless of the particular features of the institution. So, yeah, basically it's just the paragraph here is going to be there is another model, the other model states this, and you're going to get more evidence of the other model as we go through this PowerPoint. Okay, so the other model, situational or deprivation. So this should make sense from those two words. The situation or deprivation is getting things taken away. If you're deprived of something, all right. So that's what this is going to say. Situational forces, also known as the deprivation theory. This suggests that aggression occurs as a result of internal factors within the prison setting. Okay, we're going to look at what those factors are in more detail, but quickly, just to get you to understand it, it is importation model is saying that you're bringing in your traits, you're aggressive before you get in there, it's your fault, it's your fault. This is saying actually it's the prison and how the prison or how the army or how the school creates a situation, whether it's too hot, too cold, all of these things that we'll look at that might lead to aggression as well. What factors inside the prison may cause aggression? This is what we're going to look at. Okay, Sykes, deprivation theory. Sykes outlined 5 deprivations. You're going to have to know each one of these 5, just a little tiny bit about each, and we'll go through them. That arise from indignities and degradations suffered by becoming an inmate. So going to prison is not a nice thing, okay? And there's these 5 areas that reduce your kind of personal well-being and increase your deprivation. Okay, deprivation of liberty. The prisoner isn't someone who is trusted to live in the free world and is rejected by society. Okay, how might prison take away a prisoner's liberty? Numbers, uniforms, you would have seen these before, Zimbardo study, anonymity, all of these things. If we use numbers, wear uniforms, then we know that might increase our anonymity, make us more likely to be part of a group. We see that over and over again. Prisoners have to ask before they eat, sleep, shower and interact. So that constant reduction of liberty. Liberty is freedom. So they, everything. They get told when they go and eat, they get told when they go and do exercise. And that can lead to problems. I'm sure some of you have a problem with the school having to ask you, it will tell you when to do things, and well, why do we have to have a uniform? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? This kind of asking why your liberty is being reduced, and that's a real trait of people, is to ask that. So there's nothing new with you getting maybe a bit annoyed with the way the school asks you to do things. Okay, deprivation of autonomy. Prisoners have no power, few choices, so that can be quite hard. That reduces your kind of likelihood to enjoy yourself there. Prisoners are often told what to do. There's no exercise today, but not informed of the reasons why. This can often lead to feelings of almost total helplessness among inmates. This situation can often lead to frustration and in turn aggression. And we'll look at the frustration-aggression hypothesis. If you're with frustration, with the inability to make any decisions for yourself, what do you have left other than to be aggressive, to maybe take a bit of control by being aggressive is the theory. Okay, what effect might this have on prisoners upon their release? It's an interesting question. Moving on. Deprivation of goods and services. Inmates don't have the stuff that we expect in the free world. The Western emphasis on possessions makes this difficult. So a reduction of all of the things that maybe, rightly or wrongly, we pride ourselves on. Oh, I've got a big TV, I've got a big car, I've got, this watch, that watch, this phone, that phone. Okay? And we reduce, or we take it completely away. So they don't have any of those possessions. Some people think that prison is structured to make their life as close to poverty as possible. This deprivation can bring a sense of failure to those inside. And there's lots of evidence to show that prisons maybe go over the top, especially American prisons, with how much they deprive people and how much they treat them as animals. I think there's a Louis Theroux that hopefully I've found and we can watch, where he looks at American prisons versus, I think it's Swedish prisons or something like that, and just shows how different it can be. You don't have to treat people like animals and take away everything, because if you treat them like an animal, the idea, going back to that question on the last slide, if you treat them like animals for 5-10 years, when they come out, what else do they know other than that? And that's one of the big debates as to the kind of the relapse, and lots of people always seem to come back to prison because they can't function in the outside world. What things would you miss the most if you were in prison? Phones is probably the one that will jump to most of your minds. It might be that might not be the case if you were actually to do it. It might be just the freedom to walk around and watch TV when you like, or go out or go to the shops or something like that. But you imagine all of those things, goods, services that you didn't have. The idea of just being in a room with your toilet and stuff like that might scare you as well. Okay, heterosexual relationships. Many straight men find female companionship to be part of their self-identity. Lots of you may be in relationships, had relationships, know people with it. It does, as a human, become a large part of your life. I will be for as long as we're married, a very long time, I hope, but I will be forever identified with my wife, and we do things together, and that becomes part of my self-identity. 5-10 years ago it wasn't. I was a very different self-identity, but now it's part of it. And if that was denied from me, there would be an increase in my deprivation. I wouldn't feel like I did before. I wouldn't have all of my identity, so it's been reduced from me. Okay, there are many opportunities for homosexual behaviour in prisons, and from any of the big shows, big films, you'll have seen that these, the stereotypical things that can happen in prisons, and no doubt do. What we're saying here is that the many opportunities for homosexual behaviour in prison can lead to anxieties for prisoners. So either being scared about it happening, or even just that you may be in a homosexual relationship, but you have anxieties from that because maybe you aren't homosexual as such. It's that you're in prison, and that's what's happened. Right. Security. Some prisoners report fears for their safety. Many inmates describe other prisoners as violent and aggressive, and this heightened sense of threat can lead to aggressive behaviour. Okay, so that constant feeling of anxiety about being subject to aggression, or being in getting caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and all of these things, you just imagine having that all of the time, and that would lead to you being more likely to be aggressive and on edge all the time, as well as high anxiety levels. Okay, so quick one to think about: the popcorn model. This suggests that the first individual to become aggressive is like the first piece of corn to pop when the pan is heated, hopefully. maybe you haven't, but definitely the microwavable popcorn you will have seen or used. So that idea that it heats up, and then when one goes, all of the rest go. This model also suggests it's worth considering what factors lead to the heat being applied, and heat in inverted commas here, because heat could be anything. It could be the reduction of anonymity. It could be not letting them have time to run around or whatever. It's not necessarily heat. It's this idea of what is it that's making them bubble over. In other words, sort out the prison environment and inmates will not become aggressive, and that's what a lot of people think, is give them more space, more time, music, larger spaces, places to relax, then they will become less aggressive. But the reason why that doesn't happen, and the kind of underlying one, you don't need to write this down, but think about it, is society in general gets very annoyed about that, because if you're a prisoner, you've been aggressive and you deserve to be punished. Okay, and punishment is being deprived of these things. If prison suddenly became a lovely place to be, and everything was lovely and flowery, and you got lots of time to do this and read books and stuff, would it be a deterrent anymore? Okay, and that's a kind of a wider view of what you think is right and wrong. Are people going to prison? Do you think people going to prison as a punishment, or are they going to prison to try and be changed and put back into society so they can carry on? It is also believed that prisoners who do not bring values of aggression into prison can become aggressive if enough heat is applied. So that's just another point with the deprivation model, is saying if somebody might be in, let's say somebody's in prison for tax evasion or something that's not really aggressive towards anyone. It's a horrible thing to do, but it's not aggressive. But then if they're applied enough heat, enough of these deprivations, then they would also become aggressive. Zimbardo, Stanford Prison Experiment. Hopefully you know this. Again, if we haven't, I think most of the time we'll watch this. If we haven't, please let me know and we can watch the current film if and when we've got time. Stanford Prison Experiment. Zimbardo wanted to determine whether reported brutality from American prison guards was due to the guards' personalities, bad apples, or due to the prison environment, bad baskets. Study recruited 24 male participants who were subjected to intense physical and psychological tests to ensure they were suitable for the experiment, and also to make sure that none were more aggressive than others. Just on that, hopefully you understand, or you know what happened in that prison experiment, but it's a high level of evidence to support the idea that it's the situation. Okay, that he had all these 24 people which are exactly the same, and randomly gave them, right, you're a guard, you're a prisoner, and within 2 weeks it had got so violent in there that he had to stop it. So that's a lot of evidence for the situational factors. Okay, Abu Ghraib prison. If you don't like these photos, please don't look too much, but these are US Army doing awful things to prisoners, getting them to do stuff and posing on phones naked, electrical devices plugged on them, piling them on top of each other, dog barking in the guy's face, bad apples or bad baskets. So are these people, was it because of their personality traits and the way they were brought up, or is this because of the place they were in and the situation they were in? Soldiers involved were put on trial, most ended up serving time in prison. Zimbardo was called as an expert witness defending one of the prison guards. Zimbardo argued that the behaviour of the prison guard was due to situational factors from working in the prison and not due to dispositional factors, the guard's personality. What do you think? It's up to you. It's a lot to read about that if you want to try and figure out where your views lie on that. Should they go to prison, or should it be a wider picture of the army and everything they created that created those things? Okay, bit of AO3, better AO3s for you now of the situational or deprivation model. Cunningham et al. 35 inmate homicides in Texas. Okay, so that's this person looked at 35 homicides, which is murder in America, in Texas. Motivations for the murders were linked to some kind of deprivation. So with interviews, finding out on trials afterwards what caused this person to commit a murder, more often than not, Cunningham found that there was at least some kind of deprivation involved. So it was about drugs, it was about relationships or possessions. Okay, so it supports the validity of the model, supports the model and its understanding of how it can explain violence in prisons. Okay, let them have sex, I've written here. Okay, trying to make you remember it. So the model would say, if you let their partners come in, so you let your wife or your husband or whatever, your boyfriend, girlfriend come in to have a relationship for an hour or whatever it may be, that should reduce aggression. That's what the hypothesis would say of the deprivation model. You're not depriving them of sex anymore, you're letting them have sex with their partners. Hensley 2002, 256 male and female inmates in 2 prisons were allowed time to meet partners. Okay, but this led to no reduction in aggression, so it didn't support the model. Okay, so the idea that letting them, hopefully that makes sense. As always, or as in a lot of times, interaction is best. Importation is good for violence between inmates. So importation is a good way of explaining violence between inmates, and deprivation is better at explaining innate aggression to staff. A combination of deprivation and traits is the best explanation. And this should just be a separate AO3 paragraph towards the end that maybe the interaction between the two is better, rather than just saying it has to be the situation or it has to be the personality factors. Somewhere in the middle, as always, is better. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. You've got enough AO3s there. See you in a lesson.